For those with good taste.
Hey, what is going on, everybody? It's your boys from For Those With Good Taste. I'm Matt. He's Lenny.
What's up, Carl?
And we are here to deliver what seems like a plethora of MMA news and gossip today.
It's a plethora
Yeah.
of it. Okay.
Yeah, a
Let's
plethora.
do that.
I couldn't think of any other word that meant a
seems-
very large amount.
Seems extremely appropriate, Matt. A plethora of them.
I mean, because there's just so much going on, man. I mean, we had fights last week.
We had a couple of them.
We got a bunch of fights coming up this week.
We for sure do.
And then we got fights going on in the future.
That too. We have a lot of we have some news to get into, and
Yeah,
then we got
we'll-
some
we'll-
future fight picks to get into.
Yeah, we'll start off with the news, and we'll wrap it up with some of our picks for the week.
Yes, sir. Well, let's rephrase, Matt, because we are going to do news, but we're going to do some results, some news, and then some picks.
Yeah, that's the right way to do it.
Right. And we were going to start with Jiri, but I actually want to flip back a little bit further than that.
Don't go too
did
far
you
back.
see Rory Macdonald?
I
last
didn't,
week?
but I
Looked good.
heard he was putting in some work, as they would say.
Looked pretty good. Man.
Based on what you saw, what are you thinking?
It was against a guy who's strictly a striker, and I wish I could remember his name right now because he's a decent fighter.
Yeah.
But he was really just going against a striker, but he did exactly what he had to do. He went out there and took him down, dominated him, and got him out very quickly. It was over, and it had to have been 2 minutes.
Yeah, I think a
this
lot
fight
of
lasted.
people were surprised to see him make the move over to. He's in PFL now.
Yeah, money talks, though,
Yeah.
Matt. Money fucking talks.
And he is-
Curtis Melander, that's who it is.
And Curtis Melander was actually a UFC vet,
Yes,
so
he's
not
legitimate,
necessarily a no-name guy.
I mean, PFL is not like a far third competitor in this.
No,
like
by any
they're
means.
fairly close to Bellator. I would say Bellator definitely has a bigger name and maybe a deeper talent bench still, but PFL's made some interesting moves. We saw Pettis a couple weeks ago. They had the flyweight a few weeks ago too. Hits hard, little guy. They're all little. Fuck.
Yeah, I know. As soon as you said flyweight, little guy.
Yeah, but either way, great knockout. It was
Oh,
a few
John
weeks-
Lineker.
Yeah, John Lineker is
There
over
we go.
there,
Yep.
right? So the male version of
Jessica Andrade. I like what you did there. It comes full circle.
But yeah, Rory Macdonald was great. I look forward to seeing him. Obviously, they're in this like tournament style thing here, and I don't know. I don't know if I love that. Like Bellator tried that too.
Well, they're trying to find the biggest way to get popularity while also flaunting the fact that they're giving out some of the biggest paydays to some of these fighters.
At the end of the
if
road,
you come
they
at
get
the
$1
end of
million.
it. Yeah, it's a pretty big deal. And a shout out to Rory Macdonald for being one of the first guys to really test free agency
Successfully.
successfully.
Because you have to imagine he's gone up at every stop in terms of money. He's
Yeah.
not going to PFL if Bellator was if he was going to make the same money at Bellator,
Which is pretty crazy, right? So he starts off with the number one promoter and made less money, goes into the middle tier performer, made a lot more money than he was making, jumps down to number 3 and is making the most money he's ever made.
Well, rule of thumb, Matt, is always be the big fish in a small pond.
I thought you were going to say fight them where they ain't.
That's also a good one. dude.
That's
Yeah,
another good one.
Sure.
It kind of it fits.
No,
Unfortunately.
it would have been perfect if I had said that, actually.
But it's a good surprise to see him coming out of it. I'm interested in seeing who he's fighting next. But that he wasn't the only guy who got a W.
Well, I mean, he was the biggest like former name that fought this weekend, probably. But we got a future star or a star in the making.
I
A
think
star is
that's
born. Tell me something, girl.
Bradley Cooper would be extremely upset with you right now. Your rendition of
That was pretty great. Dude.
unbelievable. Shallow. Here he gets a huge win. I hope I'm saying his name correctly. I couldn't focus on his fight style. All I could think of was the power of that top knot.
People were calling it a man bun. It is like that is
No,
definitively.
dude.
It looks like he has a tree coming out of his head. It looks like
Yeah.
a small root has grown out of his head.
Do you think he was paying homage to one Prince Goro from Mortal Kombat?
That is actually very true, and I
Right.
wonder if that's what he was getting into because Goro had just been on screen a
Timing
week
just
ago.
lined up.
I was thinking that he was a big fan of Groot.
Oh, I am Groot. Yeah, that's not a bad one. I mean, he is growing a tree on his head.
Mm-hmm.
But he showed that it wasn't just about his hairstyle, Len.
He had one more limb, if you know what I mean.
Whoa. It would have been cool if he would have whipped his hair back and forth. What did you
Almost.
think of the result, man?
Willow
Because
tree.
whoa.
Fuck,
What are we
dude.
doing here, dude? Get a
Wordplay,
job.
Wordplay, impeccable, dude.
A bit of a crazy fight. What did you think of it coming
Dude,
out of it?
So I think it was Teddy Atlas who said he's like, Jiri is like a wave like it's like he's like the ocean.
He's
It wasn't
like
even
the
like the
ocean,
wave. He's
yeah.
like an ocean, right? He's like unrelenting because
Yeah.
they're even when he got hit. Because Dominic Reyes, I think, made a great showing of himself.
Yeah.
And apparently, he was taking a bunch of shit from people online to the point where he had to shut off comments on social media. I thought that was crazy.
Over all this shit, man.
I just don't even understand how you could give a guy shit who hung in there with a monster. This guy was not going away.
No, he wasn't going away. And man, when you talk about him being like an ocean coming wave after wave after wave, Dominic stood there and threw
Fired
shots back and forth.
He
and
did exactly what, like, dude, you know what it reminded me of? Like, so when you're a little kid, they tell you to, like, stand up to a bully, right? Like, a bully, like, as soon as you punch back, like, a bully's not a bully anymore, right? A lot of them are just puffing themselves up to be tough. This was like Dominic Reyes punching the bully. But the bully's like, nah, I'm really that dude.
No, bro, I want your lunch money.
Yeah, like,
all right?
no, like, haha, you hit me. I'm just gonna beat you up now. Like he just was like, he continually just hung Reyes upside down and shook him for his change.
And did it in a real dominant fashion, man. When we talk about like Dominic putting in a good showing, for Jiri to take some punishment, but really come out really looking unscathed and almost looking like he was a full weight class above this guy. I thought that was pretty interesting.
Well, you say that, but after the fight, I was like, okay, where? Because Reyes is coming now off 3 losses, and I was like, where does he go?
Yeah, but he doesn't. Yeah,
you immediately say to yourself, whenever people get on stretches like that, I think the first thought as a fan of MMA you go to is like, okay, they're going to think about switching weights, right?
It's tough to do that
Fresh
at 205.
Start. But where does he go? Because he's way too big to drop down, right?
Yeah.
And he's way too small to
tweener.
Go up. Yeah, he's got to work some stuff out. He's still young enough at 205. This wasn't a bad fight. He can still hang with these guys. But
here's the issue. You're coming off of your 3rd straight loss. 2 of them have been performances where you maybe were set up to win. Not necessarily, no disrespect to Jan, but I think a lot of people expected coming off of that performance against John Jones that Dominic Reyes might have been the heir apparent. Mm-hmm. He wasn't, right? Yeah. And we know that wasn't a fluke now, what Jan's been able to do. But now you're coming into this fight with Jiri, who, you know, was, again, a star in the making, but you still had the honus to kind of go in there and do something big with that opportunity, and he didn't.
He definitely didn't. I think, though, I was actually thinking about this, right? So there's people who come from, like, backgrounds that aren't wrestling, specifically in this case. George St. Pierre comes to mind, who can develop it, right? The greats can develop wrestling, even though they didn't do it growing up. They were talking about this in the broadcast. Dominic Reyes came from football. He didn't come from wrestling, right? And in order for him to have won a fight like he just fought against Jiri, it just felt like that was the skill that he would have to lean on.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Because the striking wasn't getting it done. So he was holding his own in the striking, but there wasn't a moment that he really controlled it. He rocked him once, right?
He rocked him once, but outside of that, you really don't see the tide changing when he's landing his shots.
Exactly. Like it never felt like Jiri wasn't in control. Even during the guillotine, it felt like he was like in charge of the moment. So when wrestling there would have been the one thing to me that he could have really done, not pulling guard, not standing against the cage and like firing back counters. The only thing he could have really done to take control of that fight was probably wrestle more. And
get in the clinch. Do something.
Yeah, but you don't. And I don't know. Is that not a great skill of his? I don't watch the guy train or anything, but I would just say from a novice eye watching the sport, it's like if he came from more of a wrestling background, I think that would have benefited him there. And is that something that no matter how great of an athlete you are, these guys are on the mats when they're like 6, 7, 8 years old, maybe 12, 13, 14. But regardless, most of them aren't picking up wrestling at 23 or 24 years old. Yeah. Like this guy's technique in football was to be physical maybe, but it was never to like you're taught not to hold people. You know, you're not, once you get to the ground, you're not keeping somebody there. There's just differences.
It's about controlling your opponent in a much different way, right? No matter where you are on the field, there's always the need to kind of be the better athlete, right? When you look at Dominic Reyes, you're like, okay, with the skill set that he has right now, if you look at the 3 losses that he's coming off of, to your point, how much could wrestling have played a difference?
And again, we don't even know. I'm just hypothesizing, right? What he could
You're
have done
making a valid point.
It might not even worked, right? Like this is not my definitive answer to like, hey, this is how he could have beat him. It's just that that's a whole, that to me, when they were talking about just what I was listening to on the broadcast, and I think about his past, and I think about that fight, that's the only difference maker that I could think of, and he could still lost the same exact way. Getting on from that, the special person and the person who deserves all the focus and praise is obviously Jiri. I mean, this guy Prochazka. So 2 fights into the UFC, this guy's going to be fighting for a title.
Yeah.
And it goes to say he built his name in Risen. Like he built his name outside of the UFC. He's on like an 18-fight win streak now.
Yep.
He's beat the current Bellator heavyweight champ or light heavyweight championship, Vadim.
Yep.
So the guy comes out like a bat out of hell and never lets up at all in these fights. He's exactly what the UFC wants, and it's like going to breathe.
What the UFC needs.
It's going to breathe some real life because it's that specialness that you got from John Jones. I think it's going to be like, this has always been a money division for the UFC. Whether it's been Tito, Chuck, and Randy, or you get into the Rashad. I don't necessarily think Rashad was that much, or Shogun for that matter. But John Jones is in John. There's a very short window where it's Lyoto, Rashad, and Shogun.
Well, you got to think that it's more so one person's reign and kind of split up between 3, right? Because Rashad had the huge knockout of Chuck Liddell to win the title, not to win the title, but to set up his title.
Exactly. Yeah.
Then he beats Forrest Griffin,
which is big. Well, that's another star right there.
Which is another
and Rampage Jackson. That's another.
You're naming all these guys who weren't stars because they held the title for long periods of time. It was because they were kind of larger than life figures at the time.
They're big, physical. Cool, because like I think we often forget that like our trained eye for boxing and heavyweight boxing they're not as big as like the biggest UFC fighter. I don't, like, as a person who doesn't follow boxing close enough to know the weight classes, but but I know that like super heavy is 200, 220, right?
Yep.
So it's like we see guys regularly that are much bigger than that. Anthony Johnson was a savage of a man.
My boy Rumble. Yeah.
So,
and when you talk about Rumble, I mean, you're talking a guy who was once fought at 170 pounds and was a huge guy. If you're comparing that to, let's say, a Bernard Hopkins who fought at 168, 180 pounds, like the size difference is incredible.
And I just always think of like guys like that. I mean, because even Tyson was fighting at what, like 210, maybe less than that.
He was short. He was just really stocky. Evander Holyfield's another one. He's fighting at under 220.
It's wild.
We see these guys. You think of Lyoto Machida, he doesn't look like a big guy, but he's fighting at 205 pounds and was one of the best in the world at it.
Yeah, and he was on the smaller side for that.
Yeah.
Nonetheless, he ends up getting this fucking masterful spinning elbow.
The way he sets it up, though, man, it's like
it's just fluidity and emotion.
Relentless punches, the elbow to set up the spinning elbow. It's all just
that's
beautiful.
Where I draw the John Jones comparison, though, is I look at. Like, that's the creativity that John had, right? In his prime, like early John, was he would just see something and act on it. You know, you think about the Bonner throws and the Bonner spinning elbow. Remember, he catches the leg
and catches
spins
him with the spinning elbow.
This, it's like he took the momentum of missing a right elbow and just used it to whip the left elbow.
He saw that he was moving the other, like when you see your opponent moving off the cage and you see him going in the opposite direction, it maybe doesn't click to you right away to elbow the guy in the face. It was so natural. And it's, I think, what makes this guy really special.
I brought this up. I think I tweeted this last week after Rose, because Rose did an interview with Helwani after her title win, and it was talking about seeing, minute details in the way Weili moved, right?
Yeah.
And it's kind of similar to this is what I was thinking, and it is just that it's one of the most incredible facets of MMA, or the things that interest me the most, is you train and you plan and you see all these things, but once you're in the cage itself, all that preparation makes it so you're in like a flow state.
Yeah.
And the amount of data that they're computing in 1 second is just, you talk about, Joe Rogan talked about alpha brain, dude. Like, I don't know how much alpha brain you'd need to take to do that, but I don't think I could ever do it.
But I think that that's something that's always resonated with sports, is athletes talk about being in the zone, right? That, to me, that's just another larger scale of what that is. You're seeing things that normal people just wouldn't see. You're able to do things that normal people wouldn't be able to do. And that's what Jiri does with this entire exchange, where he, in a matter of 30 seconds, rocks Dominic Reyes, closes his eye, and then knocks him out. And it all happens seamlessly.
Yeah. Because you're right. Like, you were talking about, like, he sees that Reyes has got to step off the cage to that direction, and it's like, how can I make that an impact for myself? Oh, like, and this is all what he has to, like,
in a split second.
This is what he's got to see. And we, we've all had those little moments where we're in like the Matrix on something, you know what I mean? But that's just at a whole other level of seeing, this is kind of a darker one, but it's like when you've been in a car crash at some time, right?
Unfortunately.
How crazy is a car crash? Like how it's like everything, it happens like that, but everything kind of goes
down.
Quiet, and you see all these things happening, and you have to like, and you're reacting to them like in real time, and it's happening so fast, but everything feels really, really slow. And I think it's just your adrenaline, right? So he's at such an adrenaline high that he can see and do all these things. It's like fucking Jason Statham and Crank. Like.
Well, that's a great reference. But that's exactly what it is it's time slowing down so that your brain and your body can kind of interpret and trigger what to do. What's your response going to be? Is your fight or flight mode? Mm-hmm. This entire sequence, and we keep praising it, but it is really something special.
The crazy thing is there's so many good knockouts this year, because I would say like this is definitively knockout of the year.
You can't really
like
say that.
A week ago, I watched fucking Jorge Masvidal's brain explode and water.
We also
saw
Weili Zhang get standing head kick. There's so many different things.
It's nuts, man.
Let's appreciate it for what it is.
Corey Sandhagen, by the way.
Oh, the Frankie Edgar knockout? Yeah.
This also, to my point, and that's the perfect knockout to mention, go watch that knockout and look at the amount of data that he has to process to land that knee, because that knee is the smoothest fucking thing you'll ever see.
It's a walk-off.
And it's like, and he just does it. He sees Frankie on the previous one. I'm sure he saw it in training and practiced it a lot. It's the same thing with Jorge Masvidal. Using all of that stuff, and then in the moment, like accurately pulling it off. It's like you're just computing this.
I'm not going to pull this, but Joe Rogan has the famous quote that MMA is just high stakes problem solving, right at its finest.
And that's such an
accurate that is
thing.
The best thing that I can think of, because they're doing so many different equations, and at that one moment, you've figured out the answer, you've circled it, and one of the biggest, finest moves comes off from it. And it's a moment that we should appreciate.
Dude, this guy is going to be tough for either one of the people who comes out of. Like, Jan is probably a better matchup for Jiri. Yes and no. Actually, I take that back, because Glover Teixeira.
Dude.
He's this
Watch
guy,
your mouth,
dude.
okay?
Because he of all the people, I think, who could use their wrestling and their grappling to negate most of what Jiri can do.
And he'll look to do it.
The issue is Glover's hittable. And if he gets hit by this man, it's going to be a bad night. It could be over in one.
Glover is not good with cutting space.
Yeah.
Right. When it comes to getting in close and really setting up his takedowns, a lot of his takedowns come from somebody charging him and they kind of just run into him.
He barges
through your strikes and he takes those punches. But if he's gonna have to take those shots from the wave of relentless, it sets up.
I guess what I mean is if this has to be, all fights start on their feet. And so like a stand-up battle wise, and if they're gonna play the game that Jiri wants to really play, Jan probably matches up better to play that game. If you want to see somebody who maybe counters what Jiri does very well, I think Glover is an interesting test to see. Because if he comes out there, and I don't want to see him just beat the shit out of Glover for one round, because that is a good build-up win to have on your resume, but it doesn't answer any questions.
It doesn't do anything for him going forward.
Whereas if you give me him like grappling with Glover for a round and then knocking him out.
Yeah.
Now I'm like
giving him the cheese.
This guy's going to be a real problem until he has the Gaethje issue of like you can only absorb so much damage, and once you're at the top highest level, people are going to make you pay for hands down chin up.
You can only come forward so many times before somebody hurts you.
Yeah.
Right.
It's calculated what he's doing. I don't think he's like a stupid guy. It's just he did get hit a lot by Reyes.
But he was able to withstand it. And again, I do think he came in being a much bigger guy in this fight. But neither here nor there. Props where they're due. It'll be interesting to see where both of these guys are headed after this. One thing I did want to mention, kind of the end of a road for one particular fighter, Cub Swanson.
Yeah.
I didn't want to leave this on a note.
That kick was gross, huh?
But I was in a PlayStation chat while that was going on, and someone was just saying right before it happened, they were like, "Man, I don't want to see Cub go out on a bad note," and then wham. Life comes at you fast. So it was pretty rough.
He's got more left in the tank. He's a great fighter still to this day. That I thought he looked good in that fight, and then not much that happened in it either. He didn't look bad.
No,
but
I don't know, man.
Kick, kicks to the stomach, kicks to the liver, and the way reactions are, like his body just shut down, and it sucks because like what's his name? The guy Gigi, like that. That's the kick. The guy who he fought.
Oh, okay.
Because
Yeah.
they called it the Gigi kick or something. This
Gregor Gillespie?
No,
sorry.
I'm
guy.
definitely right on the name. I just don't know if I'm saying it right.
You probably are.
Casuals, right?
Yeah,
Fuck.
we're a bunch of casuals. Fuck you guys. That's aggressive. No, but I think this is a good part for us to talk about. We're talking about an event where some great things happen. I think it's time to talk about some disappointment, Len.
What do you got for me?
Mainly the fact that your favorite fighter, second favorite fighter, Nate Diaz, unfortunately had to pull out, but he didn't pull out all the way because we got a rescheduled date.
So that girl's still pregnant.
Oh, yeah. Pull-out game somewhat weak. Pulls out against Leon Edwards, gets rescheduled for, I think, 3 weeks.
Yeah, he basically was like, that's still the guy I want to fight.
Yeah.
This isn't a huge setback. It does kind of suck because, it hurts the card coming up.
Mm-hmm.
But now we get a super stacked card in a couple months. Or what you said, 3 weeks, right?
Yeah.
So the card coming up also that he was supposed to be on 62 is still a pretty solid card because you have Tony Ferguson bumping up to co-main. They said it's just a minor back injury. It does suck if it really puts off his training, for instance, a little bit.
The positive thing that I take away is that the fight's already been rescheduled,
Mm-hmm.
right? So that's something I think that you can take away where you're like, it's not that bad where the fight's completely off the table.
But is he going to end up just going in like off of cut? Like, you know what? If he can't really train right now, that means 2 weeks from now he's going to have to start cutting weight.
I'd be interested to see if he's not training. Maybe it's like you don't want to take a fight in that like position, but maybe you're okay to train. Who knows? We don't know what the limitations are. But it's good to see that fight gets rebooked. As we're getting some answers on that, Diaz.
Toughly on the constant like fighters just falling out. It was Tyron Woodley and then Khazmat 3 times, and now he gets and then he fights Bilal Muhammad, has the fucking eye poke.
Yeah, Leon's just got the bad juju right now, and hopefully
tough go.
It could come to fruition so we can see some performances from him. But we'll move on to your first favorite fighter.
Yes, the GOAT.
We got some pretty definitive news. Not towards when he'd be fighting next, but who he won't be fighting.
Yeah, we had speculated last week that Nick Diaz, or they had been heavily rumoring, which I assume at this point was coming from maybe Khazmat's team.
You bastards. They got us again.
Trying to angle for a Nick Diaz fight. And Nick Diaz's manager has since come out and said, ain't happening. No offense to the guy. Good fighter. We're just not interested in this time in fighting somebody at basically the level that Khazmat is at a popularity standpoint.
Yeah, I would say that it was one of those instances where you and I got honey-dicked. And
well, I still don't think, I saw all of this stuff and I was like, should we be like, damn, like we spent a decent amount of time talking about that matchup. But I don't think we were ever like, this is highly likely to happen. All I said from the beginning is that it'd be a fun fight. And I don't think it's a fight that Nick Diaz isn't running from anybody, first of all. But I don't think he'd have a problem taking a fight like that. But from a standpoint of coming back after 6 years and having the name value that the Diaz brothers know that they hold in the sport, and just looking at the reaction they had at 261 a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, people will love seeing him.
It doesn't make sense on a star standpoint. But it does lead you to be like, who is there?
Who is the big name?
That could be a name big enough to draw him out. There's one major name that's like not fighting anybody right now, but I have this feeling that he wants to fight at 185. I don't think he wants to fight at 170.
Who are you thinking?
I don't have a 185 name so much, Matt, as like I think at 170, the person who's not booked with anybody that I could see. Well, I mean, they are talking about booking Colby is who I'm talking about against Usman, but he's not currently booked with anybody. That's a huge name in the current standpoint of like, if you put the two of them against each other, I don't like the fight for Nick.
No,
truthfully, not a big fan of it.
It's probably one of the few big names out there, but I think you and I we're pretty hip to the fact that I think, if Nate is going to fight Leon Edwards, and if he does beat Leon, it sets him up kind of for like a run at 170. So it wouldn't make sense for Nick.
Just don't think Nick's going to want to step in on Nate's like parade there, and he never wants to be in a situation where they are opposite of each other in rankings and stuff. He doesn't want to take food off of Nate's plate.
No, definitely not. And they're definitely all about promoting all of them. It's not just about one guy being the big shtick.
So I saw Carlos Condit throw his name out there. I think it'd be an interesting fight from a standpoint of hardcore fans loving it.
It's got the storyline.
Does it have a huge name? Is Carlos Condit a huge name? No, it's more, to me, that doesn't sound like a pay-per-view headliner as much as it sounds like
UFC on ESPN.
Yeah, but which isn't terrible, but I think Nick and Nate are pay-per-view draws.
Nick is definitely worth the squeeze when you think about getting the numbers for pay-per-view.
185 is tough because I would almost jump him. I mean, Kamaru did say also. Kamaru was like, I'll fight.
He
Nick
said he'll
Diaz.
fight, but he knows where the money's
Exactly.
at. He's not stupid.
So I wouldn't mind that fight. I think that'd be kind of interesting.
Yeah.
I like that more than the Covington fight in some ways. I also
don't take that away from me. I want to see it.
No, I mean I like it for Nick Diaz more than
No.
Nick Diaz
I understand what you're saying,
Covington.
but Covington versus Usman needs to
is
happen.
what you want.
Needs to happen.
I mean, he wants fucking Michael
Listen,
Chiesa. So,
I think you need to understand we don't give a shit what Kamaru Usman wants. All right.
but I guess outside of them, I would then look at Kelvin Gastelum being interesting. Maybe Apollo Costa.
So I wasn't thinking Paulo Costa. I was thinking. I'm gonna blank on it now.
Robert Whittaker.
No, not Robert Whittaker. You said Gastelum, and as soon as you said Gastelum, I was like, Uriah Hall. Uriah Hall's coming off.
It's too low down the totem pole,
Yeah,
and it's not a big enough name.
Okay,
it's
perhaps.
not. It's too. If you're not going to fight Khazmat's got a realistically a bigger amount of clout right now than Uriah Hall does.
I don't know. Uriah Hall just broke a dude's leg. Neither here nor there. I think there's a lot
Anderson Silva weirdly.
Yeah, there's a lot of questions out there, and we're definitely going to keep our ear to the ground on figuring out who that next big name is.
I'm
for
listening.
Nick. But let's talk about somebody that Nick has fought and is kind of getting a farewell song, so to speak. Talking about one Diego Sanchez.
He is on the way out the front door here. This is such a weird standpoint. I didn't watch. He just did an interview. I think he did an interview with Sirius with maybe like Anthony Smith. And I also just saw a video that he posted talking about Dana White and Dana White having gambling problems and like losing money on betting on Diego, which was weird. But he seemed like weirdly lucid in that video. Like he didn't seem as crazy as he normally did. He was talking about like his history with the company and like how much he's done for him.
I mean, he's come such a long way.
He's like, I train in Vegas and you won't even talk to me. Like I intentionally train in Vegas to try and like have FaceTime with you, but I see pictures with you and Clay Guida is who he brought up.
Oh, he's feeling salty about it.
So I think but dude, Diego, like at the end of the day, you've put yourself in a bad situation with a crazy person, right?
Yeah.
That's on you. You also, like, when you start talking about having brain issues and mental problems and things like that, like, what are they supposed to really do other than tell you, well, we can't employ you anymore, man? Like,
it's hard to back Diego in this sense because, one, he's got the resume that would match any CVS receipt because it is rather long, my man.
Yes.
And we're at the point now where do you want to see Diego Sanchez fight anymore as a fight fan? Casual or not, is he a name that when you see...
It doesn't hold the same weight any longer.
It doesn't,
From
man.
an excitement standpoint, it just it's more of a spectacle on like I feel like he's going to say some really weird things. And now I'm going to watch this other guy run around with a knife and chase him in a cage and train. It's just like a weird... It's a sad way to go out because honestly, and I don't want to be too dark on it, but I kind of like immediately was... like CTE.
Oh yeah, it's cringeworthy, man. Like it's a real thing. Man. You're talking about somebody who's been through wars, who legitimately wears the scars that he's been through. It's tough, man. You never want to see a guy like this go out that way, but you can't really understand where he's going.
No, there's not much of a upward trajectory in this. I just hope that he, finds the next step in his career and is able to kind of either, end on a high note. I don't want to see him go out really low.
I don't want to see him on a Jake Paul
But make your money
card.
is also my thing. Don't fight Jake Paul.
I don't want to see you on a Jake Paul card.
That's actually bad. Don't put that in the air.
All right, Lenny. There's not a lot of times where a fight is announced and it's on a card of one of our Golden Boys, and then we're like, oh, snap. 2 of our Golden Boys are going to be on the same card?
You said Golden Boy, though? Dude, you keep saying Golden Boy, and I'm like, Oscar De La Hoya?
No, Oscar De La Hoya hasn't been a Golden Boy in quite some time.
He's not my Golden Boy at all.
Well, I'm certainly talking about our boy Sean O'Malley.
I am.
And I am, and you're listening.
Heard it.
He has been booked to fight one Louis Smolka, someone who is a name that we've talked about on this show.
He's also a name that's just not ranked.
I was going to say, we haven't exactly talked about him in the right light.
I think the only time we've really talked about him is on like EA UFC 3 or something.
Well, we were talking about a big name where there was a lot, or not a big name, a name where there were big expectations and just falling very well short, and then kind of being a game or almost a gatekeeper in one of the tougher divisions in the UFC.
My initial review on this fight was like, that's going to be a banger.
That's what you're thinking?
Yeah, like my initial thought was like, going to be a banger. And then it was like, But why? Like this guy, like O'Malley was trying to get fights with Dominic Cruz and Petr Yan, like all these big names. And how do we settle on Luis Smolka unless, just hypothesizing, is maybe the UFC trying to protect their investment?
Do you think that the UFC wanted to avoid a situation where Sugar Sean's mouth would write a check that his tush couldn't cash?
Yes. However, I don't begrudge them for this. In fact, I've often looked at the way Bellator handles stars.
Yeah.
Like MVP to this day has really not fought anybody that's that big of a name outside of Paul Daly and Douglas Lima.
Well, I mean, there's a reason for that, sir, because when he did fight Douglas Lima, it did not go well.
No, it didn't work out.
No.
But you just look at the way they've built people.
Yeah.
And that's how that's how boxing
You're thinking
builds
like an Aaron
names.
Pico.
Sure. Yeah. Like that's how boxing builds names. That's how Bellator would. That's how any major sports should. And the UFC is, for whatever reason, always fought against the stigma that you should do that.
Yeah.
So they've always prided themselves on having the best fight the best. So in a lot of instances, a guy like Sean O'Malley would get fed to some of the top names like a Dominic Cruz, which, he'd learn some stuff from that fight. But, is it going to be good to kill off any major hype by giving him another loss at this point in his career? Yeah. It's similar to a guy like Chase Hooper, where this Dana White Contender Series is great, but sometimes guys get through that initial show, and now you're really young, and you're on the UFC stage,
and whether the rubber needs to meet the road at some point,
and whether you're in the prelims, the early prelims, the middle prelims, or if you happen to get on the main card, like Greg Hardy, for instance. Yep. The problem is the opposite of the cage from you is going to be some guy who is dedicating his entire life to this, and this could be his last fight, his last chance in the UFC. And it's like you're just meeting each other on opposite ends, and like you just get run over.
Yeah, you're up against a rather big beast who's kind of stuck in a corner, and you've got to fight through that and hopefully be able to measure up to these expectations that have kind of been put on you.
So that's where I actually don't like the fight in terms of I don't know what it really does. What they want is O'Malley to have a highlight reel, right?
Yeah, hopefully.
And this is a good one to put on the highlight reel if he comes out there and in a minute and a half, 2 minutes, blows out Luis Smolka, because the name is perfect for that.
Yep.
Right? Because Joe Rogan can be like, the last time out, he went against Luis Smolka, who's a dog. Goes out there, fights everybody tooth and nail.
The name value
got
somewhat.
him out there in a minute and a half. Like that's what we're looking at. We're looking at a highlight reel. Does it do anything? Where do we go next? Like I need to see him fight another person like a Chito Vera, a guy who is that top 10, top 15 range to really see what we've got again.
Yeah, you got to wonder that with this booking, have they made their intentions clear that they do want to make or do want to protect their investment and want to put Sean in a position where his next loss is going to be probably his last, right? Does that make sense?
No, I don't think that's accurate. Like I can't. It's just.
So I think of the GSP factor, right? When GSP lost to Matt Hughes, nobody thought it was the end of GSP, right? When GSP lost to Matt Serra, it was considered a fluke and nobody could really believe that it happened, but it was that moment where it was like, oh, this was the moment that set GSP on his way. So could you hope that it's something like that?
You think that if like Sean O'Malley was to lose, it wouldn't be this would be a bad loss.
This would be a bad loss, but if he wins this fight and then he goes on to win his next fight, and then you set him up with a guy like Dominic Cruz, or maybe you set him up with a title fight, and he loses that's going to be the one that everyone goes, oh, he's going to learn a lot from this, and this will probably be the last time we see him lose like this.
Got a squeaky chair on you, bud.
Gotta put the grease on it.
No kidding. So, you know what I was actually more thinking of, it's similar to, I guess what you're talking about is, for instance, like I said, Greg Hardy, remember, they booked him against Volkov.
Yeah, Alexander Volkov.
And like beat the shit out of him.
Well, I think he took that fight on short notice, but
nonetheless, is that if you were really investing in like trying to like, is that the way you would treat Sean O'Malley? It's just it's just different guys get different trajectories here, and it just seems like Sean O'Malley. Some people would argue maybe this was a Conor McGregor type build,
sure,
where Conor should have been fighting ranked guys, but he was getting Dennis Seaver in a main event slot.
To really build up his name, to like get that highlight reel.
Like hand-picking the right guys to put around him. This just feels a little bit more like that. And that's not a bad thing, but it's just we should look at what it is. Like first-round knockout, Sean O'Malley.
Let's call it what it is when we know what the booking is.
Get my pick out there now.
So I mean,
that's what it is. Yeah,
that's what it is.
It's like Sean O'Malley first round knockout.
Yeah, we'll give a little bit more detailed instruction when we get there. But at the end of the day,
it's basically
we know who we're picking.
Mark it down. That was
all right.
my pick.
Fight picks start right now.
They just did actually.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. You pick that fight. That fight's not happening for a couple months, but there are some fights that are happening rather soon, Len.
Starting tomorrow.
Like tomorrow. Yeah, no,
Thursday.
I meant like
maybe today to you. Maybe it was yesterday to you.
Depending on when you're listening.
Today is Wednesday. Though,
it could be in the past by the time you hear this, but it's a big fight nonetheless. One Sergio Pettis taking on, and I'm gonna get upset because I'm pretty sure his name is Juan Archuleta, but pretty big fight on both sides for Bellator.
We've been getting all of the major promotions right now, including one, are all really putting out big fights right now.
Juan Archuleta, got it.
Juan Archuleta.
Juan.
Both very good fighters. I don't know nearly as much about Juan Archuleta. It's hard with how many UFC cards there are to then follow every single Bellator champion.
I can tell you this: he's a big name, one of the biggest names outside of the UFC.
Yes,
we'll say that.
And he's size-wise quite a bit bigger than Sergio Pettis. I want to so badly pick Sergio Pettis, but and size isn't everything. But seeing these two men next to each other in this picture, and first of all, the drip on Juan. He came to play, dude. Dude, is wild.
One can only hope to look that good in a 3-piece suit that doesn't involve a shirt.
Holy shit, dude, that is a look. I
think you just made your pick.
I hope you can't see from the waist down on me right now.
Some would say it's getting chubby in here.
Yeah.
Well, I was actually already on the Juan Archuleta train. Sergio Pettis for me didn't really do or didn't really make waves in the UFC. And I feel like his signing with Bellator was supposed to be a big one. And I just don't see how it is, if that makes sense. So I'm taking Archuleta in this one as well.
I'm bout it, dude. I'm with you.
And route it?
Yes, Archuleta. Juan Archuleta with the 3-piece purple suit and the nice hat on, dude. Damn, dude.
I mean, I'm going to get this off the picture because I don't think I can trust you anymore.
How mad was Sergio Pettis when he showed up to Bellator's photo shoot that day? He's like, you motherfucker.
He was
Juan.
like, you guys...
Dude, he looks like Steve Jobs. Like, this motherfucker's standing next to... Look at
Don't be rude, dude. That's upsetting.
Dude, Sergio Pettis came with the Steve Jobs drip to the nightclub.
But we're going to move on to PFL 3, being headlined by UFC veteran and former heavyweight champion Fabrizio Verdum.
Potential GOAT. I always got to throw that out there, dude.
Yikes, dude.
Greatest heavyweight of all time. You're not with me, dude? He's got to be like top 5. We've talked about this on this podcast.
No, I know.
I'm not going to reiterate it, but 100% he feels like he's top 5.
He's up there. He's beat the biggest names. We can certainly say that he's up there. A little bit of a step down in competition for him, though.
You'd say, but that's because all this man has done is
win.
Fight the best of the best in the fucking world for 15 years now. That's why, without needing to give any real analysis on this,
you picking him?
I'm picking Fabrizio Verdum.
Okay. Just to kind of be a stick in the mud, I'm gonna go with Renan Ferreira with this one.
Not that do you have any idea who he's fought?
I imagine he's fought a couple Brazilians. He's
good guess.
He's fought a guy from Argentina.
Okay,
and the rest of them are going to be Americans. I just genuinely don't want to agree with you on this one.
No, it's good to pick a counter pick. Before we switch to move on to the next couple fights, 2 people I want to point out are fighting on this card. Kayla Harrison, potentially the best 145er in the world right now.
A lot of people want to see what she's going to do with this one.
I want to see her keep building her name so we eventually get a Amanda Nunes fight maybe down the line or a Shevchenko fight down the line.
There's not a lot of girls that can size up Amanda Nunes. Kayla Harrison definitely
I'd like Kayla Harrison to run over to Bellator for a real quick second and beat up a cyborg or two.
Twice.
And then the other name I want to point out, are you familiar with Muhammad Usman?
Yeah, it's Kamaru's big brother.
Have you seen this motherfucker?
He's huge.
You thought I got a little chubby for fucking
no.
purple suit there, dude.
He's up there with like Elaine Nanjiani for biggest, best body.
You know who he reminded me of a little bit? He looks like OSP. You know how OSP is like...
dude, his body's way better than OSP.
It's better, but you know how OSP looks like a freak? Like,
well, it's because he's got the wingspan of like a pterodactyl.
Yeah, dude, Muhammad Usman, he's my pick. I don't know.
Be honest, I don't know if he's actually related to Kamaru.
He is.
I thought he was.
Definitively.
Yeah, okay. Shout out to Muhammad. I'll take him in this one as well. It's very hard to pick against a guy who looks like that. I mean, he's facing a guy named Brandon Sales. Don't want to disrespect him, but doesn't really seem like fighting should be his main thing.
And not that we're like a couple of casuals or anything, but I do tend to pick some of my fights just based on looks alone. So Archuleta and now Usman.
Show me a guy who doesn't do
yes.
that.
Show me a girl who's not a size queen, and I'll show you a guy who doesn't.
Is also not a size queen. Yeesh, we need to move the camera up in this instance because Lenny is messing with the table.
Yes, sir.
But it's not that we're casuals. It's that there's bigger fish to fry, Len. And they come up in the form of one UFC event being headlined by, and I know that you had a beef with this, Karate Hottie. Michelle Waterson.
I don't have. Never mind.
No, I'm gonna say it.
I was gonna say something about beef and the Karate Hottie.
Oh, don't do that, dude.
I respect
Michelle Waterson is headlining this fight against Marina Rodriguez. A late replacement for Nate Diaz and Leon Edwards falling off the card. Nope, completely wrong. Who fell off this card, Len? Fix that.
You've stumped my brain now because we're leaving in a couple casuals, baby.
Yeah, darn it.
So I'm with it. This should not be. Again, I love Michelle Waterson. She's an exciting fighter. She's main evented quite a few UFC cards at this point. So I'm sure that goes into the reason why she's being picked for that role. However, Sandhagen
Dillashaw. Sorry,
there we go.
That's my bad, guys.
Awesome fight, dude. God damn it.
TJ got headbutted.
Brutal. Did you see, actually, can I sidetrack us for a second?
Of course you can.
So TJ's eye looked nasty. Have you seen Joanna's fucking shin?
Yeah.
Yuck.
And she was calling people out. What? I was like, what are you doing, girl?
She's like, oh, come fight me in the streets now,
She was like,
bitch.
oh, I just want everybody to know I'm coming back. Yeah. It's like, girl, you need to calm down. Get that shin looked at.
It's been a long time since we've gotten a Matt impression on here.
My bad,
Fuck. Dude, let's bring him back.
Dude, Joanna's one of my favorite impressions
That was a great one, dude. You kind of like George St. Pierre.
She's just about it, man.
I am not impressed.
I'm not impressed by your performance. No, that's my George St. Pierre, but my Joanna's a little bit more subtle. Okay. But she was calling out Rose Namajunas. She was calling out Wei Li Zhang.
Bitches can get it, just like my shin did.
The baddest bitch is still around. You got to understand, if you're going to talk shit, you can't have your shin split open like that.
Back on track, though. I just look at this card as a whole, and if I was going to pick a fight to fill into that main event slot that has names and competitive value enough for that, not to say Marion Renault is not Marina Rodriguez. It would have been worse if it was Renault. But not to say Marina Rodriguez isn't a fucking dog, as Joe Rogan would tell me, isn't getting out there.
She's a motherfucker, dude.
Yeah. Like, not to say that's not happening, but I think Neil Magny, Jeff Neal should be main eventing.
Yeah, I mean, this
Jeff
is almost
coming off a really competitive fight.
Yeah, this one to me was a no-brainer. I feel like Jeff Neal is one of those guys that can still kind of build his name at this division. And what better way to build it than to fight a guy who has one of the longest win streaks in this division, as far as holding a record?
Well, he did. I mean,
he did. I'm not saying he's still on that. He's not still on that trend.
Got a whooping given to him.
But Neil Magny's one of those names that you want to kind of set a foundation for yourself on your way to the title. And this could have been a big opportunity for him to do that. Do you think that they offered it to him and he just couldn't fill 5 rounds?
Jeff Neal?
Either way. Magny, of course, could, but do you think Jeff Neal's team wasn't about the 5 rounds?
He didn't seem like he had an issue going the 5 rounds when we watched him main event. Who did he? Why am I slipping the name?
Yeah, I did the same thing. I brought it up, though.
Stay off the weed, as Stephen A. says, dude.
Stephen Thompson.
Yeah, so he went a full 5 with Stephen Thompson. He got beat up in that 5, but it was competitive. He fought hard. It's not like he gassed out necessarily, if I remember it, during that one.
And we knew that was a huge step up in competition.
On a week's notice to go from 3 rounds to 5 rounds, maybe you're right. Maybe that was the holdup there. That's a good point.
That's the only thing I can think of because, again, we love the Karate Hottie here. But to have her headline this card when you have, I know Donald Cerrone was a late fill-in, but the idea that she's headlining over Donald Cerrone and over Neil Magny, Jeff Neal, doesn't really make a lot of sense.
Yeah. So with that being said, my picks on both of them will be as follows. Michelle Waterson.
Yeah, I think this one's pretty easy.
Like obvious pick for that fight. I will also be siding with Donald Cowboy Cerrone in the co-main.
Okay.
Just because I want to see my guy win.
Yeah, you're not going to have a pick against Cerrone if it's somebody that we don't really.
Especially because the guy he's fighting hasn't fought a ton of talent. And like the last guy he did fight that was a big name is Anthony Pettis, who, not that you can do MMA math, has not looked as good in the past couple of years, maybe.
If I'm not mistaken, I think his fight with Rice McKee also was one of those that actually should have gone the other way. So he was very close to being on a 3-fight losing streak.
Yikes. I like Chaos Williams, by the way.
So that's the reason why I remember that fact, is because he got destroyed by Chaos Williams, and then people thought he lost the second fight. Yikes. I can't disagree with you, man. Alex Morano, maybe he wins it, but you're never going to hear us pick against Donald Cerrone in this scenario.
And lastly for me, Matt, on this card, I am going to be going with Jeff Neal.
Yeah, I feel like you kind of played that hand.
I really like Neil Magny, but I in this instance, I am going to be going with a Jeff Neal.
I want to agree with you. I actually like the idea of Jeff Neal getting his start on the way to the title. Man, you want to talk about a tough person to try and get that foundation started against? This is a perennial train derailer, if I could say that.
He's a hype killer.
Neil Magny just knows how to get it done. And when you look at fights that he's lost, aside from maybe Santiago Ponzinibbio, they were big kind of fights, not fights that you really expected him to win. And he has come away with some pretty big name wins. I mean, you're talking Robbie Lawler, Carlos Condit. I mean, of course, all of these are a little bit later. I mean, when he beat Hector Lombard, it was a pretty big deal because a lot of people expected him to lose that fight.
So, yeah, what I think it comes down to, and you're 100% right, is where do you see Jeff Neal in this division? Because there is a level, I mean, for lack of a better term, you would consider Neil Magny to maybe be a little bit of a gatekeeper.
He's this generation's John Fitch.
So, John Fitch was the second best welterweight in the world. Don't do that.
Okay.
For a long period, he was the second best welterweight in the world.
Okay, he was born to watch.
But that's not Neil Magny. Neil Magny's not born to watch.
He's this generation's somewhat version of John Fitch.
All right, great.
There we go.
That's where we are again. You really
fuck John Fitch, dude. You ruined Thiago Alves' career.
But now you're making me feel like fuck Neil Magny is your message, and like he's a great guy. He is a person who does beat everybody he's supposed to beat. Occasionally gets a big win. Hector Lombard, Robbie Lawler, some big names that he's knocked off on there. Carlos Condit. But then, to your point, he fights a Damian Maia after a big win streak, loses. Gets on another win streak, fights Lorenz Larkin, loses. Goes up and fights Rafael Dos Anjos, loses. Puts together a few wins. I don't know where Ponzinibbio really falls in all of this, but he lost in that one. Yeah. And then again, what does he do? 3 wins, loses to Chiesa who's in the top 10.
Yeah.
So I think Jeff Neal is a perennial top 10er from here on out, at least for the next couple of years. He seems that talented. He didn't get outclassed by a guy like Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, so that's who I'm going to pick.
I'm going to agree with you. I'll take Jeff Neal on this one.
Okay. And Matt, close us out with your expertise here. I want to talk to you about a little boxing.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you brought this up because, in my opinion, I'm sure you would probably agree now that we're looking back on it, this is by far the biggest fight that we've got going on this weekend.
Bar none, right? This is the main event of the weekend.
We're talking about Canelo Alvarez versus Billy Joe Saunders, England's own Billy Joe Saunders.
Do you like Billy Joel, Matt?
I'm a fan. Billy Joe Saunders to me.
I keep calling him Billy Joel.
You said Billy Joel, and I jumped on that, but I'm also, I'm a Mets fan, so we kind of love Billy Joel.
Yeah, you're a Billy Joel guy.
I'll rock with it, dude. I've listened to that CD only a million times.
I grew up on a little Joel.
But Billy Joe Saunders doesn't nearly have the resume of Billy Joel, if I can say that. One of those fighters that around the boxing world is known for having an enormous amount of talent, but hasn't really been able to showcase it. And unfortunately, Billy Joe Saunders' biggest card to date was being on the Logan Paul KSI undercard.
Wild.
And that would kind of blow your mind when you think about the scale of which he's kind of moving up in this sense. But it's no surprise to anyone that he is being faced up against Canelo Alvarez for Canelo Alvarez's super middleweight title.
Did you happen to see any of the kerfuffle that happened yesterday?
What kerfuffle are you referring to, Len?
There was a little run-in between Canelo and some of Billy Joe... His entourage,
and
right?
The gypsies.
And
the travelers.
I guess the major dispute here is there's a couple of things that Billy Joe all of a sudden wants, like the week of the fight, to happen.
Yep.
Which seems like he's looking for a way out, if you ask me. Secondly... how much? I mean, I understand because I've seen the Apex fight cards versus some of the bigger arenas during the pandemic era, right? Where a small cage versus big cage.
Yeah.
This is an argument over 18-foot ring versus a 22-foot ring, correct?
And the idea behind this is that Billy Joe knows that Canelo is very far away from the person who couldn't really sustain for 12 rounds. Right, when we looked at Canelo maybe 5-6 years ago, there was a lot of talk about him being able to
He's a power puncher, but maybe
handle the gas tank, so to speak. And Billy Joe Saunders knows that if he's going to be pressured as much as he thinks he's going to be pressured in this fight, a bigger ring makes more sense, right? It's going to be better for him in that sense. Canelo, I don't think gives a damn either way.
Probably doesn't, but like, weren't these things agreed upon like months ago? I'd assume. Why is this like? Is this even plausible that they would make a change to something like this 3 days before the fight?
I mean, that's like asking to change the weight of the gloves.
Yeah,
at this point, you're
these
messing
things
with
you signed an agreement for. You knew this. If you knew strategically, Billy Joe, that you needed a 22-foot ring, why wouldn't that have been a major argument point? And why do you think you have any? Who's the bigger name here? Bar none.
Bar none. Canelo's the A side here.
So what bargaining power do you have? Because this is your biggest payday.
Yeah.
Well, unless you got paid more to be on the Logan Paul card. I don't know.
And no, he didn't, because he was fighting a nobody at that point, and it took him a while to get out of that fight. But when I look at this, Lenny, this is the lamest way, I guess you can, to try and promote a fight.
Do you think that's all this was?
I would hope that's all this is, because
Canelo being like, you're a fucking pussy.
You'd have some balls if you're Billy Joe Saunders to jeopardize one of your biggest opportunities. Bar none, man. Like,
it's going to be his biggest opportunity.
It doesn't get any bigger than this. You are fighting the and I'm going to use this term again, the golden boy of boxing at this point.
Wow. Oscar De La Hoya getting a ton of love in
heir apparent to Floyd Mayweather as boxing's kingpin. And
at the lighter weight classes.
At the lighter, sure.
You're probably right in general, but I feel like Tyson Fury would have like something to say about it. In current stature, his cards are going to do pretty well, right?
Right now, from a draw perspective, Tyson Fury isn't touching Canelo Alvarez. Okay. I think you underappreciate the Mexican fan base and what they actually do.
No offense to the Mexican people.
Shout out Cinco de Mayo. Now it's rubbing off on me. I hate you. But no, let's call it what it is. This is the biggest fight of Billy Joe Saunders' career. To Canelo Alvarez, this is just another feather in his cap of being able to clear out a division that he currently owns. Rubber's got to meet the road at some point. Billy Joe Saunders has to come into this fight and not be the slow starter that he always is.
Is he a good enough boxer to pull this off, Matt?
I think from a skill set point, if anyone can do it, he can.
Okay. That's pretty high praise. I mean, this is a guy who's fought Triple G, so
and there are levels to this game, man. But Billy Joe Saunders does come from the same camp as Tyson Fury. He's someone who has sparred with Tyson Fury and understands what movement and what boxing really is at its fundamentals.
Okay.
The issue is that you're talking about probably one of the best boxers of all time.
Canelo seems like he understands the fundamentals of boxing pretty well.
So when I say understanding the fundamentals, you're talking about somebody who has got a lot of technique. And when you talk about his wins and how he puts together wins, Billy Joe Saunders is not a knockout puncher by any means. He's going to put pressure on you. But now he's being put on the other side where I think Canelo is going to be able to put more pressure. It's more so a question about when does Canelo get started. Does Canelo get started right away? We've seen him do that against Triple G. But he almost had a point to prove in those fights. Here it gets a little bit more interesting.
So I'll put you on the spot here because I mean I'm gonna make a very for lack of a better term, casual pick.
Well, my question for you was, knowing what you know about the fight game on the boxing side, knowing what you know about Canelo Alvarez, is there anything that would steer you to pick any other way?
No, I probably will never pick against Canelo Alvarez because I know how boxing works. First of all, is this or is this not like a mandatory fight that he has to take? Is this one of those ones where he has to make a title defense and they're forcing him to fight Billy Joe?
It is one of those senses where he was going to have to fight somebody, right? Like he wasn't going to be able to pick his fights anymore, or he wasn't going to be able to have a tune-up fight. Billy Joe just happened to be that guy.
Okay.
And now it comes to a point where if Canelo can beat Billy Joe, there's really only talk of, does he go up in weight, right? Does he continue making the moves that he should make? And honestly, it's Canelo's ballgame at this point. He could wait and let people come and challenge him. There really aren't any names out there that are going to draw interest.
So like a Triple G3 isn't going to get it done?
I mean, that's really the only other fight out there for him. But if you're a boxing...
Where are some of these other guys in terms of weight classes around him, like a Crawford or any of these guys?
No, you're all talking smaller guys. I mean, Terrence Crawford, Errol Spence. I mean, these are guys that could eventually come up.
They'd have to...
Yeah, but that's, again, you're the bigger guy kind of waiting for these smaller guys. That in most cases you'd want to be the smaller guy going and challenging those guys.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't have that option to keep growing and to say I'm the baddest guy on the planet. I'm not taking on these guys who are just getting fatter to fight me.
But at the same time, like, he is basically saying I'm the baddest guy on the planet. Come find me and I'll defend it.
I'm the A side. I've got the ticket
of everything he's ever going to do at this point. Right?
I've got the golden ticket. And if you want to come out to the chocolate factory, okay. It's happening at 154 to 160 pounds.
So your professional pick, Matt. Me, Canelo. This guy, Canelo.
This one wasn't easy at first when I thought about it, but it's going to be tough to pick against Canelo Alvarez. I think he wins this by decision. I don't think that we're going to see anything too crazy in the form of a TKO or KO. My hope is that this is a good enough fight to set up a second fight down the road. I'm hoping that Billy Joe shows up, gives his A game,
makes a good account of himself,
and does his skill set justice, and maybe sets himself up for a bigger payday down the road.
So just don't get finished, is what you're saying.
Don't get finished and make it interesting, man. You've got to look at something that Triple G did against Canelo and find your way to make that your own. Because that was a style that stifled Canelo in their first fight. I think Canelo lost that fight. New York gave him a draw, or Vegas gave him a draw. I forget who it was. One of those black eyes on the sport of boxing. But this sets up Canelo to really be top dog in that division.
Sick, dude. So Canelo, and we're pretty lined up on most of this week, but a lot of really sick stuff coming up down the plate here. Make sure to take a swing at it this weekend.
I mean, and hopefully when you take a swing, you hit the subscribe button.
Hit it like Chris Weidman's leg last week.
Too soon, dude.
Fuck.
Well, if you like Chris Weidman and you're hoping to see a full recovery, hit the like button. Yeah. Because likes are what's going to help.
I heard he actually looks at our likes and our subscriptions, and it makes him more optimistic for the future.
Well, so, he's one of those with good taste. And if you're one of those with good taste,
do you have good taste?
You hit us up on Instagram at For Those With Good Taste.
You probably come see me and the boys. Well, just me and Matt on Twitter.
Over on the tweets?
Yes.
At Good Taste Live.
Good Taste Live, Matt.
Absolutely, buddy.
Perfect.
And let us know who are your picks. Hit us in the comments. But until next time, guys, we're getting the hell out of here.
Au revoir.
Peace. Oh, you speaking different languages, dude? Making me look bad?
Mind fucking blown, bitches.
Whatever.
Still here.
Stupid.
For those with good taste.